Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to the Rancher Podcast. I've really enjoyed talking with many of you through social media, and I keep putting up little quizzes and informational stuff on my Instagram and Facebook pages. So if you have not already, would you please go ahead and give my Instagram and Facebook pages a follow? I also have one big request that I know I talked about at the end of the last episode, but would really appreciate it that if you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, if you could just go ahead and please rate that podcast on the star scale, and then also leave a review, which I mentioned the process on the last one, but if this is your first time or you missed the last episode, just go ahead. I know you just clicked play on this episode. If you would go down to the bottom of the profile on my show, the Rancher Podcast, then you can go ahead and just click the stars. They'll be at the very bottom. And you can rate it 1 to 5, and then you can also leave a little review. And I would really appreciate it if you would do that. Now back to the episode. So I have another history lesson today, and this time we're going to go back to the first ever registered American quarter horse. And I'm sure many of you have heard this name before. It is none other than Wimpy P-1. But, before we get into Wimpy and how we got this honor of being the first, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsors. I'm proud to have Elite Ranch Consulting as one of the first sponsors of the Rancher Podcast. Elite Ranch Consulting is your one-stop shop for protecting your real estate investment. Whether you inherited a piece of land, bought a ranch as your vacation home, or are simply looking to maximize the land you already own, Elite Ranch Consulting's team of experts can help you make the right decisions to make your land profitable. Visit EliteRanchConsulting.com today to learn more about how they can help you protect your American dream. The famous Wimpy P-1 was just born plain old Wimpy on the King Ranch in South Texas in early 1937. And I don't mean that he was a weak horse, but he didn't have the registration designation of P1 yet. And some accounts contest the year, and there is a little bit of a discrepancy between whether he was born on the middle of March, on March 3rd actually, or April 3rd. But it is safe to say that he was born in the spring of 1937. Now, Wimpy is a pretty tough name to be given. And, I don't have any first-hand accounts available to explain the name, but I do have a theory. So if you would please indulge me for a moment, if you have actual knowledge of this and, would like to reach out and let me know where the name comes from, I would really appreciate it. But I do have a little bit of a theory, so here we go. I think that Wimpy might be named for the lovable hamburger eater from the Popeyes cartoons. The character actually premiered in 1933 and was very popular for the next decade or so. So it's really not out of the realm of possibility that Wimpy P-1's name came from the cartoon. Wimpy was just a really good friend to Popeye in the show, and for a horse to be named after a cartoon character is definitely not out of the realm of possibility. But who knows, maybe he was actually just a wimpy little colt when he came out. But I'm going to go ahead and take a stab and guess that he might have been named after the cartoon character. So please, if I'm wrong, please reach out. I'd love to talk with someone more about it, and we will put a correction out if that's the case. So regardless, though, the Soulless colt, which was out of a mare named Panda, earned his title as the first ever registered American quarter horse in 1941. And the story of that is in Wimpy's Hall of Fame entry on the American Quarter Horse Association's website, and it says the following. It says, Bob Clayburgh decided to show Wimpy in the 1941 Fort Worth Southwestern Exposition and Fat Stock Show. Now, I don't know about y'all, that's a very big name. Nowadays we just say the Fort Worth Stock Show, but it was a lot longer title back then. But back to what they were saying. They said the first winner of the stallion class would receive the number P1 in AQHA's first stud book. Now, in the arena were Judge Jim Minnick and ring steward Robert Denhart and John Burns, who was president of the show. Preceding Wimpy was Silvertone, a Palomino owned and shown by Lee Underwood. There was also Little Joe Jr. by Joe Gonzalez, and Silver Dawn, bred by the Wagner Ranch. As the stallion entered the ring, Jim Minnick turned to Denhart and said, "What do you think of them pumpkins, Bob?" More stallions entered and joined the circling parade. Minnick finally stopped the horses, and the blue ribbon went to Wimpy, and with it, the P-1 in the stud book. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that pumpkins comment is about, so we will leave it at that. But I do think this is a pretty cool story that, I honestly, I think of like the Secretariat Disney movie. If you remove the pumpkins comment, of course, that's still a weird one to me. But I think that this could be a Disney movie in the line of the Secretariat one. I mean, it really doesn't get much better than a competition with such an interesting prize that has a lasting impact on an entire breed. They would really play it up, and you can just kind of play that out in your head. I feel like it would start out with a small, scrawny horse named Wimpy on a small South Texas farm. Because, of course, they wouldn't play up the idea that he was part of the King Ranch, which is one of the largest and most beautiful ranches in the world. They would probably give him a more humble beginning. But then, the lovable Bob Clayburgh, his owner, would probably show up and beat a character that was probably very bombastic. The E. Paul Wagner's character would probably be someone that's like Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard or something. And there would be a very suspenseful moment. But, I think that I just thought that would be a great idea. So if there's any movie producers out there, there's a story for you. I think it would be a good one. But I digress. Another name that came up in that was Bob Denhart, and he was the ring steward at the time. And I mentioned this in the first ever episode about the history of the American Quarter Horse, that he was really a large influence on the creation of the association. Bob Denhart was friends with the writer J. Frank Dobie, and he was just very passionate about research of bloodlines and breeds. And, he was very instrumental in the founding of the American Quarter Horse Association. So it's really kind of cool to see him, pop up in this story. And we'll probably get more into the life of Bob Denhart in another episode. I think that it's one that really does need to be told that not a lot of people know about. But he actually wrote a really great piece about this event in the Journal, and it had a great title. And I think that I might even... if I could ever find that, I would love to post that article. If anyone has access to it, let me know. But it was called Wimpy P-1 Earned His Number. So I think that that's a great way to put it, because sometimes, like with Bully Rock just was the first one to show up in America, as we learned from the episode. And so he got this major distinction just kind of from taking a trip, but Wimpy P-1 actually he won the honor of being the first ever horse, not because he was in the right place at the right time, but because he beat out the competition. So ultimately, I don't know if this prize for being first in the registry was thought as like a super historical thing at the time, because rarely do people actually recognize that they're making history when they do it. But I am sure that, these exhibitors were at least thinking that this P-1 designation would help them market their horses as a foundation sire for the American Quarter Horse brand. And it seems to have worked for Wimpy, who went on to produce 174 registered foals on the King Ranch. And, those foals, they include names like Bill Cody, Silver Wimpy, and Lauro, who made major impacts on the breed. And, I came across a really interesting story on the Chronicles website from 2014 that detailed how Wimpy P-1's registration papers were bought by a group of quarter horse enthusiasts off of eBay, of all places, and donated to the American Quarter Horse Museum. Now, again, it is hard to imagine how this piece of history ended up on eBay, but you'll have to read the story on the Chronicles website to learn more. I will put it in the description of the episode and also post it on my social media. But it is quite the tale, just think about it if, in a Nicolas Cage movie type of way, This is kind of like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, one of these other kind of founding documents, all of a sudden just popping up on eBay and being real. But like I said, I'll let you read that chronicle story for yourself. And it was quite the tale that was probably likely due to the fact that Wimpy traded owners quite a few times, or not quite a few, but a few times near the end of his life. So in 1958, when he was about 20 years old, Bob Clayburgh gave the aging stallion to George Clegg as a thank you gift and as an acknowledgement of his efforts in training this horse along with many others. But Wimpy actually died a year later in 1959 at the age of 22. At that time, Clegg had actually sold him to an oil man named Rex Cobble, and 2 years after his death, there was a statue erected of Wimpy P-1 at the American Quarter Horse Association's headquarters in Amarillo. And then finally, 30 years later, the legacy of Wimpy P-1 was cemented when he became part of the AQHA Hall of Fame class of 1989. You know, quite a few horses in the industry today can trace their lines back to the old number P1, and there is no doubt he arises in any conversation on notable quarter horses. And as I mentioned earlier, unlike Bully Rock, this first horse earned his position, as Denhart put it. Well, this is a short episode today, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about Wimpy P-1 because he is so important, and I want to open the conversation about other horses you want to hear about, their stories. And I really appreciate you guys sticking with me and listening to these episodes. So if you ever have any input, like I've always said, feel free to reach out to me at rancherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook and message me there. And like I said, don't forget to review the podcast on iTunes. But until next time, God bless and Godspeed.